The balance on my laptop screen read $3.17. I refreshed the page twice from a metal desk inside the deployment communications tent, listening to the generators vibrate beyond the canvas walls. Our checking account had held more than $26,000 4 days earlier. The savings account beneath it now showed zero. Even the emergency fund I had built before marrying Daniel had been reduced to 91 cents. A message appeared on my phone while I was still staring at the numbers. Daniel, don't call the bank. I've handled what needed to be handled. I called him instead. He answered on the fourth ring. I could hear traffic behind him and the clicking rhythm of a turn signal. Where is our money? I asked. There was a pause before he said, There's nothing left for you to come home to. That sentence did not fit the conversation we had shared 12 hours earlier. During our video call, Daniel had sat in our kitchen in Virginia and told me the mortgage was paid, our son was upstairs doing homework, and everything at home was fine. Now he was driving somewhere, our accounts were empty, and 11-year-old Noah was not answering the tablet I had given him for private calls. At first, I assumed the bank had frozen the accounts because of fraud. That was easier to believe than the alternative. Daniel and I had been married for 7 years. He knew I was scheduled to return in 6 weeks from my deployment with an Army Reserve Medical Logistics Unit. He also knew I could not simply leave my assignment, cross an ocean, and confront him in person. Put Noah on the phone, I said. He's busy. Doing what? He doesn't want to talk to you right now. Daniel's voice was controlled, almost rehearsed. That frightened me more than anger would have. I opened the transaction history. The money had not disappeared in one transfer. It had been divided into 5 withdrawals made over 3 business days. 2 electronic transfers had gone to an account ending in numbers I did not recognize. Another payment had cleared the balance on Daniel's personal credit card. The largest amount, almost $18,000, was labeled simply as a cashier's check purchased at our local branch. Daniel had been careful. He had left no single dramatic transaction that would automatically trigger the bank's fraud system. As a joint account holder, he had the legal authority to move the money. The bank would not treat my husband's withdrawals as theft merely because I had not agreed to them. What did you buy? I asked. A way forward? For whom? For Noah and me. The call ended. I sat with the phone pressed against my ear until the silence on the line became embarrassing. My first mistake was calling Daniel again. My second was leaving him a voicemail that sounded less like a deployed officer and more like a terrified mother. I told him I would contact his sister. I told him I would call the police. I told him he could take every dollar we owned, but he could not keep my son from me. Within 10 minutes, Daniel sent one final text. Your threats are exactly why I did this. I forwarded the messages to my personal email, then photographed the transaction screen with my phone. Documentation was part of my work. When medical equipment went missing, we did not begin with accusations. We began with serial numbers, access logs, date signatures, and the last confirmed location. But this was not a misplace, this was my marriage. At 2:14 in the morning, another bank notification appeared. Automatic payment declined $74.60, Blue Rijay Storgis Rululsa. The overdraft had triggered because Daniel had emptied the account without canceling the recurring charge. For several seconds, I assumed it belonged to someone else. We had never rented a storage unit. Our house had a 2-car garage, an attic, and the shed Daniel complained was half empty. I opened the payment details. The first charge had been made 5 months earlier. That was 3 weeks before my deployment orders became official. Daniel had not emptied our accounts because something had happened while I was gone. He had rented a place to hide something before I ever left. Daniel had always been better at making uncertainty sound reasonable. When we met, he was managing service contracts for a regional heating company. He could walk into a home where the furnace had failed in January, listen to 3 people talk over one another, and reduce the problem to a list. Path needed, cost estimated, appointment scheduled, panic contained. That steadiness was what drew me to him. I had spent most of my adult life preparing for what could go wrong. In medical logistics, small mistakes could become serious shortages. At home, I wanted someone who did not see every delay as a threat. Daniel gave me that for years. He was not Noah's biological father, but he had been present since Noah was 4. Noah's father, Marcus, lived in Arizona and called irregularly. Daniel attended school conferences, taught Noah to ride a bicycle, and sat beside him through an emergency appendectomy when I was away at annual training. I trusted him with the person I loved most. That was what I stood to lose, not just money or a marriage.
But Noah's belief that the adults in his life could be trusted.
The first warning appeared 8 months before my deployment. Daniel's contracting department was eliminated after the company merged with a larger competitor. He received severance and told me he wanted time to find the right position instead of accepting the first offer. I agreed. My civilian job with the hospital network covered our basic expenses and my reserve income helped. But the search stretched on. He stopped discussing applications. He became defensive when I asked about interviews. Then he started talking about opening a home inspection business. It's the first thing that's felt like mine, he said. I wanted to support him. I transferred $12,000 from my premarital savings into our joint account for training, licensing, and equipment. Daniel promised to create a formal budget. I never saw one. When I asked, he said he was still comparing costs. When packages began arriving, he called them business supplies. When I found flattened moving boxes in the garage, he said he was clearing clutter and donating old furniture while I was away. I had thanked him. From the communications tent, I logged into our shared email account. It was an address we used for household bills, school notices, and repair appointments. I searched for Blue Ridge Storage Solutions. There were no contracts or receipts. Then I checked the deleted folder. Empty. Daniel knew deleted messages remained recoverable for a limited period, so either he had permanently erased them or used another email address. I contacted the bank through its secure messaging system. Because I was a joint owner, I could request images of cleared checks and basic transfer details. The representative confirmed the cashier's check had been purchased in person, but said the payee information would take several business days to retrieve. I also asked whether the 2 electronic transfers had gone to another account at the same bank. The representative would not identify the owner, but confirmed the destination account was external and had been added through online banking 3 months earlier. 3 months earlier, Daniel had asked me to approve a login from a new device. He told me his laptop had crashed. I had received the authentication code while cooking dinner and read it aloud without asking what he was doing. My stomach tightened as I remembered how ordinary the moment had felt. I called my neighbor Elise Moreno. She was a pediatric nurse, a single mother, and the one person near our home I trusted to notice when something was wrong. "Have you seen Noah?" I asked. "Yesterday morning," she said. Daniel put 2 suitcases in the car. I assumed they were visiting his sister. Did Noah say anything? He looked upset. I waved, but he didn't wave back. I closed my eyes. Daniel's sister lived 40 minutes away. She had not answered my earlier call. "Elise, have you noticed anything being moved out of the house?" There was a hesitation. "Some furniture," she said. "A desk. Your dining chairs. A few sealed boxes." When over the last month, those were the boxes Daniel claimed were donations. Before I could respond, Elise added, "There was also a woman helping him last Saturday. I thought she was from the charity." "What woman? I don't know. Dark hair, gray SUV. She had a key." Daniel had told me no one entered our house without him present. Yet someone I had never met had been carrying my belongings through my front door with her own key. By sunrise, I had separated what little remained of my financial life from Daniel. I changed the passwords on my personal email, hospital retirement account, and credit monitoring service. I redirected my military pay to an individual account I had opened years earlier but rarely used. Then I called the 3 major credit bureaus and placed freezes under my name and Noah's. Those actions made me feel useful. They did not make Noah answer his tablet. My commanding officer found me outside the dining facility, holding a cup of coffee I had forgotten to drink. Major Haskins was not warm by nature, but she noticed details other people missed. "You've checked your phone 9 times in 2 minutes, she said. "Tell me what's happening." I gave her the shortest version possible. She did not offer to send me home or promise the army could fix a civilian marriage. She arranged coverage for my morning duties and directed me to the installation's legal assistance office. The attorney there, Captain Leah Brooks, listened without interrupting while I described the emptied accounts, the storage payment, and Daniel's refusal to let me speak with Noah. "Your husband is Noah's stepfather?" she asked. "Yes. Does he have guardianship? No power of attorney for educational or medical decisions?" I gave him a limited family care authorization before deployment. Leah asked me to send it to her. The document allowed Daniel to take Noah to medical appointments, communicate with the school, and make emergency decisions if I could not be reached. It did not transfer custody. It also expired automatically when I returned. He may be relying on the fact that most people won't read the limitations, she said. But don't assume that means he has done anything criminal. Not yet. That restraint frustrated me. My son is missing. Your son is with the adult you authorized to care for him. An adult who emptied my accounts. I understand. But the words you use now matter. She advised me to contact a civilian family law attorney in Virginia, preserve every message, and avoid threatening Daniel. She also told me to notify Noah's school that I remained his legal parent and wanted confirmation of his attendance status. I made the call from her office. The attendance secretary recognized my name immediately. Noah is no longer enrolled here, she said. I gripped the edge of the desk. Since when? His withdrawal was processed yesterday. By whom? There was a pause, followed by the sound of typing. Your husband submitted the paperwork. He isn't Noah's legal parent. We received written authorization from you. My fear became anger so quickly that I stopped thinking. I never authorized anything. Do not release his records. Do not send them anywhere. Daniel is trying to take him. Leah raised one hand, warning me to slow down, but I continued. I demanded the principal. I said the school had allowed an unauthorized adult to remove my child. By the time the call ended, I had frightened the secretary, embarrassed myself, and created a recording in which I sounded exactly as unstable as Daniel had been implying. That was my imperfect decision. I reacted before I had the document. Leah waited until I placed the phone down. Now we repair it, she said. Send a calm written request. Ask for copies of every record you are entitled to receive as Noah's parent. The school responded 2 hours later through its secure parent portal. The withdrawal packet included a transfer request for a private academy outside Richmond. Attached to it was a notarized letter stating that I had authorized Daniel to change Noah's residence and school during my deployment. My typed name appeared beneath the paragraph. Below it was a signature that looked enough like mine to survive a hurried inspection. But I knew every flaw in my own handwriting. The capital M was too narrow. The final stroke curved upward instead of down. And beside the signature was a notary stamp dated 6 days after I had left the United States. I had been more than 4,000 miles away when someone claimed to watch me sign it. The notarized letter gave me something the missing money had not, a document that could be examined. Captain Brooks helped me prepare a factual statement for the school. I attached copies of my deployment orders, travel record, and duty roster, showing I had been outside the country on the notarization date. I did not accuse Daniel of forging my signature. I stated that I had not signed the letter and requested preservation of the original submission, including its electronic delivery information. Then I contacted a civilian family law attorney named Priya Shah. She did not reassure me. Daniel has no independent custody rights, she said, but physical possession creates practical problems. We need to know where Noah is, whether Daniel has filed anything with the court, and what story he is telling. Priya requested copies of the family care authorization, school withdrawal packet, and every message Daniel had sent. She also told me not to contact the notary directly. If someone committed fraud, give them no opportunity to coordinate explanations. That afternoon, the bank uploaded the cashier's check image. The payee was not Daniel, a landlord or a business supplier. It was Wexler Family Services, LLC. I searched the company through Virginia's Public Business Registry. It had been formed 7 months earlier by a woman named Marissa Wexler. The registered address belonged to a small office complex outside Richmond. Elise's description returned to me. Dark gray SUV, a key to my house. Priya found the company's website. Wexler Family Services described itself as a private educational consulting and relocation service for families navigating high-conflict transitions. Its services included private school placement, temporary housing coordination, document preparation, and transportation. There was no mention of legal credentials. The $18,000 cashier's check suddenly looked less like stolen savings and more like a retainer. The next clue came from the storage company. I had no right to enter the unit simply because our joint account paid the bill. But I did have the right to ask for billing records tied to my bank account. Blue Ridge would not release the rental contract without the renter's permission or legal process. Yet the manager confirmed the recurring payment had been authorized using Daniel's debit card. Then he said something unexpected. The unit isn't in Daniel Mercer's name. I waited. I can't tell you whose name it is. Can you tell me whether I'm listed as an authorized person? He checked. You are not. The payment history showed 5 monthly charges, each processed 3 days after my military pay deposit. Daniel had timed the expense so it blended into the normal household withdrawals I reviewed only at the end of each month. My practical skill was inventory control. I knew how to compare records that looked unrelated until their dates formed a pattern. I downloaded 6 months of statements and built a spreadsheet. Storage payments, fuel purchases, hardware store charges, a moving company deposit, tuition application fees, payments to Wexler Family Services. Then I found 3 purchases at a home improvement store near the storage facility. The first 2 were ordinary, plastic bins and packing tape. The third was a keypad door lock. Daniel had replaced our front lock 2 weeks before I deployed. He said the old one was sticking. He programmed my fingerprint into the new lock while I watched, but I had never tested the backup code. Elise checked the house from the sidewalk. My car was gone. Curtains had been removed from the front rooms. A printed notice was taped inside the window. Profitery preparation in progress. Off-force personnel only. Priya warned me that sending Elise onto the property could create complications. The house was jointly owned, but Daniel still lived there and I would not place my neighbor in the middle of a confrontation. That was the ethical line I had to hold. I could document what was visible. I could not ask someone else to trespass because I was desperate. The deeper motive became clearer when Priya searched the local court index. Daniel had filed for divorce the morning after emptying the accounts. His petition alleged that I had abandoned the marriage through repeated military absences and that Noah had developed severe emotional distress under my care. Attached was a request for temporary possession of the house. Daniel could not ask for custody of a child who was not legally his, so he had built a different plan. He intended to take the home, control the money, move Noah into a private school, and present himself as the only stable parent before I could return and challenge the story. The emptied accounts were not his escape. They were the first step in making sure I could not afford mine. Daniel's response arrived before Priya could file anything on my behalf. He sent the voicemail I had left him to my commanding officer, Noah's former school, my civilian hospital supervisor, and several members of our family. He attached a short statement claiming I was experiencing a psychological crisis overseas and had become fixated on accusing him of kidnapping. The recording began with my voice saying, "You can take every dollar we own, but you cannot keep my son from me." It did not include Daniel telling me there was nothing left to come home to. It did not include his refusal to let Noah speak. It made me sound furious, frightened, and capable of doing something reckless. My hospital supervisor emailed to say the message had been forwarded to employee relations because Daniel had alleged that I accessed confidential systems to track him. The claim was false, but the hospital still had to review it. Until then, my remote access to the civilian network was suspended. I used that access only for required training during military leave. Losing it did not cost me my job, but it placed a question beside my name in a system where trust mattered. Major Haskins called me into a private office. "This is not disciplinary," she said. "But I need to ask whether you have used government equipment or databases for personal purposes." "No." "Have you asked anyone in your unit to locate your husband or child?" "No." "Have you threatened him?" I thought of the voicemail. I told him I would contact the police. "That is not what I asked." My face burned. I was angry. I said he couldn't keep Noah from me. I did not threaten to hurt him. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "I believe you, but belief is not documentation. From now on, assume every word you send will be read by someone who does not know you." Daniel understood that before I did. Priya called later with worse news. A petition had been filed, requesting a temporary protective order against me. Daniel alleged that I had threatened to return from deployment, force entry into the house, and remove Noah in a violent confrontation. He included the edited voicemail, screenshots of my repeated calls, and a statement from his sister Beth saying she had heard me become increasingly unstable before I left. I had not spoken to Beth in almost 2 months. The court did not make a final finding, but a short-term order was issued pending a hearing. It restricted direct contact with Daniel. Because Noah was staying with him, Daniel used the order to block my calls to Noah as well, even though Priya disputed whether the language allowed that. "We will challenge it," she said, "but do not violate it while we do." "So I just stopped being his mother?" "No, you remain his mother. But for the moment, communication needs to go through counsel or an agreed third party. The distinction was legally careful and emotionally useless. That evening, Noah's tablet disappeared from the family sharing dashboard. Daniel had removed it from the account. I sat on the edge of my cot and opened the last photograph Noah had sent me. He was standing beside a science project built from cardboard tubes and aluminum foil. His smile was uneven because one of his front teeth was still growing in. Under the photograph, his message read, "Daniel says you might miss my presentation, but I told him you always find a way." The presentation had happened 3 days earlier. I had missed it. Not because of my deployment, not because of distance, because Daniel had removed the school event from our shared calendar and told Noah I had chosen not to attend online. For the first time, I understood that the money was not the cruelest part of his plan. He was changing Noah's memory of me while I was still alive to defend it. I wanted to post everything publicly. The empty accounts, the false signature, Daniel's message, the storage payments. I wanted every relative who had received his recording to see what he had left out. Priya asked me one question. "Do you want to win the argument this week or preserve the case you will need next month?" I closed the social media page without writing a word. Then I opened my evidence spreadsheet and added a new column, what Daniel claimed. Besides, I created another, what the records proved. The first person to break Daniel's version of events was the woman I had been prepared to hate. Priya sent preservation notices to Wexler Family Services, the private academy, and the moving company listed in our bank records. She requested that they retain contracts, emails, payment instructions, identity documents, and anything Daniel had submitted in my name. Marissa Wexler responded through an attorney 2 days later. She had not been having an affair with my husband. She was the woman Elise had seen carrying boxes from my house, but the key Daniel gave her was part of a relocation contract. Her company had arranged temporary storage, school applications, furniture removal, and a short-term rental for what Daniel described as an emergency family separation. The storage unit was in Wexler Family Services' name because it was one of several units the company used during client moves. That explanation answered one question and opened several worse ones. Marissa provided Priya with a copy of Daniel's intake file. She had asked him to prove that he could make decisions for Noah. Daniel gave her my limited family care authorization, the notarized letter from the school packet, and a statement claiming I was unavailable because of an overseas behavioral health crisis. He had not merely said I was angry. He had built a paper version of me that could not be trusted. Marissa's notes showed she had questioned him more than once. Client advised that spouse remains legal parent. Requested direct confirmation before interstate relocation. Client stated spouse cannot communicate reliably. A later note read, "Client became agitated when informed child cannot be transported outside Virginia without clear authority. She knew something was wrong," I said. "She suspected something was incomplete," Priya corrected. "That is not the same as knowing the documents were false." I wanted Marissa to be part of the plan because it would have made the story simpler. A hidden relationship, a greedy consultant, two people working together to erase me. Instead, the records showed that she had suspended Daniel's relocation services after the private academy contacted her about the disputed signature. She had also issued a partial refund, $11,400. The refund never returned to our joint account. Daniel had emailed new banking instructions and directed the money to the same external account that received the smaller transfers. Priya obtained only the last 4 digits from Marissa's payment processor, but they matched the numbers on my bank records. Daniel had an account I did not know existed. The contract contained an inventory prepared when Marissa's employees removed items from our house. Most were ordinary: dining furniture, kitchen equipment, winter clothing, Noah's bicycle. Then I reached the final page. 1 sealed fireproof document case, 1 military records binder, 1 folder labeled "No Birth, Mop Medical School," 2 passports. I kept my passport with me during deployment. The second belonged to Noah. Daniel had told me it was locked in our home safe. According to the inventory, it had been placed in storage 5 days before he emptied the accounts. My blind spot had been believing Daniel's plan depended on convincing a court that he was Noah's better parent. He did not need to win immediately. He only needed enough documents, money, and distances to keep Noah hidden while I fought to locate him. Priya turned to the last section of the relocation contract. Daniel had reserved temporary housing in Pennsylvania under Wexler's corporate account. The move-in date was the following Monday. He had listed himself as Noah's father and written that the child's other parent was deceased. Marisa had crossed out that line after reviewing my authorization paperwork. Beside it, she had written, inconsistent. Client instructed to correct before transport. Daniel had never corrected it. He had simply found another way. That evening, Priya received confirmation that Noah's school records had been requested by a small online academy registered in West Virginia. The request included the same false notarized letter, but this time Daniel had attached a death certificate bearing my full name. The certificate number belonged to a real record. The woman who had died was not me. The false death certificate changed the pace of the case, but it did not produce the instant rescue I wanted. Priya reported the document to the State Vital Record Office and submitted it with an emergency motion in family court. She asked the judge to dissolve the protective order, require Daniel to disclose Noah's location, and prevent him from removing Noah from Virginia. The court scheduled a hearing 12 days later. 12 days felt obscene when my child was living with a man who had declared me dead on paper. But Daniel had to be served, his attorney needed time to respond, and the court wanted authenticated records rather than printed screenshots, so we prepared. The online academy preserved the original enrollment submission, including the email address and internet address used to upload the death certificate. The Vital Records Office confirmed in writing that the certificate number belonged to a 78-year-old woman with a similar name who had died in another county. The notary listed on my authorization letter produced her journal through counsel. There was no entry bearing my name on the date, stamped beneath my signature. More importantly, her stamp had been reported stolen from an unlocked desk drawer 6 months earlier. Daniel's sister, Beth, worked in the same insurance office where the notary rented a small room. Priya warned me not to treat coincidence as proof. Beth's statement against you is relevant, she said. Her access to the building is relevant. Neither proves she used the stamp. The bank records offered firmer ground. A subpoena response showed that Daniel's hidden account had been opened jointly with Beth 3 months before my deployment. The Wexler refund had gone there, along with the smaller transfers from our checking account. Daniel had moved most of that money again, but not before the records captured it. For nearly 2 weeks, my life narrowed into duty shifts, legal calls, and documents. I slept in fragments. I stopped opening Noah's photograph before bed because seeing his unfinished front tooth made me physically ache. Major Haskins approved emergency leave beginning the day before the hearing. She did not pull strings with the court or promise a military escort. She simply adjusted the schedule after reviewing my paperwork and confirming that my section could operate without me. Priya sent Daniel one final proposal. He could place Noah temporarily with Elise, disclose every account, return Noah's passport, and agree not to sell or remove property from the house. In exchange, I would consent to postpone the divorce disputes until both sides could exchange records properly. Daniel refused. But he offered me a 3-minute video call with Noah if I agreed in writing that Noah would remain with him until the hearing. I would not sign. Priya negotiated the call without the condition. Noah appeared on my screen from a room I did not recognize. The wall behind him was bare except for a smoke detector. His hair had grown over his ears, and he kept glancing to his left. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, sweetheart. Daniel says you're sick. I'm safe, I'm working. And I'm coming home." His mouth tightened. "Are you mad at me?" The question nearly undid me. "No, never." A voice off-screen told him not to discuss the case. Noah looked left again. "Aunt Beth says I'm supposed to call her if you ask where we are." I kept my expression still. "I'm not asking. I only need to know whether you feel safe." He hesitated too long. Then he said, "Mostly." Behind him, somewhere beyond the camera, a mechanical bell sounded twice. I recognized it because Daniel had complained about it during one of our last calls before I deployed, the warning bell at a railroad crossing near Beth's townhouse. The call ended at exactly 3 minutes. I told Priya what I had heard. She passed it to the court-appointed guardian ad litem assigned after the emergency filing. The guardian did not promise Noah was there, but she requested authorization to verify the address. The night before the hearing, I landed in Virginia wearing civilian clothes and carrying one duffel bag. Priya met me outside the terminal with a binder containing bank records, school files, the notary journal, and the inventory from the storage unit. On top was a printed copy of the declined automatic payment that had started everything. By 9 the next morning, Daniel would have to explain why every document he used to erase me led back to someone standing beside him. Daniel was already seated when I entered the courtroom. He wore the navy suit I had bought him for job interviews, though the jacket pulled slightly at the buttons. Beth sat behind him with her hands folded over a leather purse. Neither looked toward me. The guardian ad litem approached Priya before the judge entered. She had visited Beth's house the previous evening. Noah was there. He appeared physically unharmed, but he had been sleeping on a sofa and completing online worksheets without confirmed enrollment in any school. When the judge took the bench, Daniel's attorney began with the voicemail. He described me as volatile, controlling, and unwilling to accept that Noah had become frightened of my repeated absences. Daniel testified that he moved the money because he feared I would return and cut him off financially. I was trying to create stability, he said. Priya did not argue with his feelings. She asked about dates. Mr. Mercer, when did you hire Wexler Family Services? Before she deployed. When did you open the account with your sister? I don't remember. The bank record was placed before him. 3 months before my departure. When did you place Noah's passport in storage? Daniel looked toward his attorney. I was protecting important documents. From whom? From my wife. Priya handed him the inventory bearing his signature. Then she showed him the storage payment history. The first automatic charge had cleared weeks before any voicemail, accusation, or alleged crisis. You testify that you acted because of her threatening behavior after deployment, Priya said. Why were you preparing to relocate her child before she left? Daniel's attorney objected to the wording. The judge allowed Priya to rephrase. Daniel said nothing for several seconds. I knew she would leave again, he finally answered. She always leaves. There it was, not cruelty exactly, but resentment hardened into permission. He spoke about school events I had missed, holidays interrupted by duty, and years of being the parent who stayed home. Some of what he said was true. My absences had cost him. I had expected competence from him, without noticing how deeply he had begun to hate being needed only when I was gone. But pain did not make the documents authentic. Priya presented my deployment records and the notary's journal. Daniel denied creating the authorization letter. He also denied submitting the death certificate. The online academy's preserved records showed otherwise. The application had been uploaded from Beth's home internet connection using Daniel's email address. Beth was called next. At first, she insisted she had only helped her brother open an account because he feared I would freeze the joint funds. She claimed she knew nothing about the stolen notary stamp. Then Priya showed her a withdrawal slip from the hidden account. Beth had removed $4,000 the morning after the Wexler refund arrived. What was that money for? Priya asked. Beth looked at Daniel. He stared at the table. My mortgage was behind, she said. And the stamp? Her attorney advised her not to answer questions that could expose her to criminal liability. The family court judge did not demand a confession. She simply noted that Beth was invoking that right and moved on. Daniel's argument collapsed through accumulation, not drama. The forged authorization, the false death record, the hidden funds, the stored passport, the relocation contract, the conflicting school applications. Noah found at an undisclosed address after Daniel refused to reveal his location. The judge dissolved the protective order against me. She ordered Noah returned to my care that afternoon, prohibited Daniel from removing or contacting him outside supervised arrangements, froze the remaining traceable funds, and barred either of us from selling or disposing of marital property. She made no criminal ruling. Instead, she directed that the disputed documents be preserved and sent to the appropriate authorities for review. Daniel looked at me only once. I raised him too, he said quietly. I believe that was the part he wanted someone to understand. You did, I answered, and then you made him afraid I was gone. The courtroom deputy opened the side door. Noah stood beside the guardian with his backpack pressed against his chest. He did not run toward me. He looked at Daniel first, then at Beth, as though waiting for permission. I lowered myself to one knee and held out my hand. After a moment, he crossed the room and took it. Noah held my hand until we reached the courthouse parking lot, then he let go. Elise was waiting beside Pri's car with a small overnight bag, a clean sweatshirt, and the stuffed gray dog Noah had owned since kindergarten. When she offered it to him, he pressed it against his ribs but did not smile. Can we go home? He asked. Priya and I exchanged a look. The order allowed me to return to the house, but Daniel's belongings were still inside, and investigators had requested that certain documents and devices remain undisturbed until they could be collected. More importantly, Noah had spent weeks being told that I might arrive angry and take him away. Walking him directly into the center of that conflict felt wrong. "We're staying with Elise for a few days," I said. His face tightened. "Because you don't have a house anymore?" "We still have the house. It just needs time." Daniel had taught him to hear uncertainty as danger. I could see it in the way Noah studied every answer for what I had left out. That first night, he slept on an air mattress in Elise's guest room. At 2 in the morning, I found him sitting upright with the lamp on. "Did you come back because the judge made you?" he asked. I sat on the floor beside him. "No. Daniel said your job mattered more. I wanted to defend every absence, every duty day, every call I had made from parking lots and airports. Instead, I told him the part that was mine. I should have noticed how alone you felt. I'm sorry I didn't." He looked down at the gray dog. "Are they going to arrest him?" "I don't know. Do you want them to?" That answer was harder. I want the adults who made false documents to be held responsible. But I don't want you to feel guilty for loving Daniel. Noah turned off the lamp without replying. The consequences arrived in pieces. The bank recovered part of the money remaining in the hidden account. Most of the cashier's check payment had already been spent on relocation fees, debt, Beth's mortgage, and legal expenses. Priya warned me that repayment would be addressed through the divorce and possibly a separate civil claim. There would be no sudden restoration of everything Daniel had taken. The hospital completed its review and found no evidence that I had misused confidential systems. My access was restored, but the written allegation remained in an internal file with the finding attached. I hated knowing it existed, even cleared. Daniel was ordered to reimburse a portion of my temporary housing and legal costs. His supervised contact with Noah began at a family visitation center after the guardian recommended counseling and a gradual schedule. Beth stopped cooperating after hiring a criminal defense attorney. The notary stamp issue and false death certificate were referred for investigation. No one promised charges and no one used the word prison. Our divorce continued. At the first property conference, Daniel agreed to release Noah's passport and my military records from storage. He also surrendered the code to our house. Afterward, he waited in the hallway while his attorney spoke with Priya. "I didn't think she would really take him out of state," I heard Beth say from several feet away. Daniel answered, "You knew enough." It was the closest either of them came to admitting what they had done. A week later, Daniel sent a message through the court-approved parenting application. "I was afraid you would come home and decide you didn't need me anymore. I know that doesn't excuse it. I miss him." I read it twice. Part of me remembered him teaching Noah to balance on a bicycle, running one hand behind the seat until Noah no longer needed it. Another part remembered the death certificate carrying my name. I did not forgive him. I replied only, "Noah may love you. You must never use that love to make him fear me again. Follow the visitation plan." When we finally returned to the house, Noah stopped just inside the front door. The rooms looked stripped and unfamiliar. Pale rectangles marked where pictures had hung. The dining table was gone. Dust outlined the furniture Daniel had moved into storage. Noah reached for my hand again. This time he did not let go. 7 months later, Noah and I were sitting on the floor of the dining room, assembling a new table from a box of flat wooden pieces and badly translated instructions. He held up 2 nearly identical screws. "Which one?" "The shorter one. They're the same." "They are absolutely not the same." He placed them beside each other, studied them, and smiled when he saw the difference. It was a small smile, but it came without caution. For months, every happy expression had seemed to pass through an internal checkpoint before reaching his face. Now he laughed when I attached one of the legs backward. The house still carried evidence of what had happened. We had not replaced every piece of furniture Daniel removed, had chosen not to turn recovery into a race to make the rooms look untouched. They had been touched. So had we. The divorce became final 6 weeks earlier. I kept the house after refinancing it into my name. Daniel received credit for his share of the equity, reduced by the money he had diverted and the expenses created by his conduct. The settlement did not restore every dollar. Legal fees consumed more than I wanted to calculate, and some funds could not be recovered. Beth repaid the $4,000 she withdrew as part of a civil agreement. The investigation into the false documents continued separately. Her attorney had negotiated with the authorities, but I was not told every detail, and I stopped asking Priya to predict the outcome. I had learned that justice rarely arrived as one clean event. It came as restrictions, repayments, corrected records, uncomfortable interviews, and doors that no longer opened for the people who had abused your trust. Daniel's visits with Noah remained supervised. At first, Noah refused to attend. Then he agreed to 20 minutes, later 45. His counselor helped him understand that seeing Daniel did not betray me and loving me did not betray Daniel. I never asked what they discussed. I only asked whether Noah wanted to return the following week. Sometimes he said yes, sometimes he said no. Both answers were allowed. I also changed the way I handled my service obligations. I did not leave the reserve, though guilt tempted me to make that promise during our hardest nights. Instead, I stopped pretending my absences required no repair. Before every training weekend, Noah and I reviewed the schedule together. He knew who would pick him up, when I would call, and exactly when I would return. Then I kept every promise I could. My hospital removed Daniel's allegation from active review records after its retention period ended, leaving only the finding that I had been cleared. Major Haskins later told me my work during deployment had never been questioned by the people who actually worked beside me. Still, I was different when I returned, more careful with access, less willing to confuse trust with avoidance, better at asking questions before a small inconsistency became a private system operating beneath my life. When the table was finally upright, Noah pressed both hands against it to test whether it wobbled. "It's good," he announced. One leg was slightly uneven, but I did not correct him. I went to the kitchen for plates and noticed an email notification from Blue Ridge Storage Solutions. The last disputed unit had been closed, and the automatic billing authorization was finally canceled. For months, I had wanted that company's name erased from every account and inbox. Instead, I printed the final receipt. I placed it in the fireproof case beside the forged letter, the corrected school records, and the court orders. Then I removed the first declined payment notice and looked at it one final time. $74.60. Daniel had remembered the passports, the money, the locks, the school files, and the story he wanted everyone to believe. He forgot one ordinary payment. That payment did not save me by itself. It gave me a place to begin. The rest came from refusing to look away once I understood that the life I trusted had been quietly packed into boxes. Noah called me back to the dining room. We ate takeout at our uneven table beneath the pale marks where old pictures had once hung. The house did not look restored. It looked honest. And for the first time since my deployment, honest felt safer than complete. If this story stayed with you, tell me which clue first made you understand how long Daniel had been planning his move. And if you value stories about women who protect their families through patience, evidence, and difficult choices, you're welcome to join me for the next one.